And do you find, John, just on that, that are the technology companies kind of, more leaning towards that kind of an exercise just because, the change or, it's not a linear curve there? Or are there, like obviously you mentioned Bosch and DHL, these are non-technology companies, but have you seen that predominantly that there are more tech space based companies who rather do that versus, the traditional old economy companies where it's brick and mortar or just different verticals or different industries? What have you seen?
So what's interesting, and having had also the experience myself of working for a startup in London many years ago that was in the Web3 space, that the kind of thinking that I think is inherent to the foresight, what we call futures thinking, I think actually is intuitive to kind of this startup sort of mindset. You're constantly sort of like scanning for signals. You're running different scenarios. You have this kind of agility first. You're open to the pivot. You're trying to really think about how you can move forward, not only on a daily basis, but also move towards that goal, right? So you're doing sprints, but you're doing sprints with a purpose. And I actually think what's interesting is that a lot of that mindset, a lot of those practices really are what we're trying to get some of these more established, or even we might even say bureaucratic or archaic organizations to think about. I think it's when these organizations, go for a long time. So for example, I was the foresight coordinator for the Red Cross, Red Crescent, right? It's a 150 plus year old humanitarian organization, and it's hard to change.
Yeah.
So a lot of times foresight is brought into those organizations where change is quite difficult, versus if you're at a startup where change is the normal. Change is assumed, right? And you might pivot in a relatively short period of time. So I think that the tech space shows a lot more fluidity there. And there are lots of tech companies that do utilize this. And again, bring this in, whether it's in a risk management perspective, whether it's maybe even in HR to support leadership with training or capability, or even in the context of a strategy or an innovation team.